Look around you. Almost everything we rely on, from the clothes you're wearing right now to the phone in your pocket, spend weeks floating on the ocean. The global economy is quite literally held together by a fleet of steel leviathans. But today, we aren't just looking at the ships themselves. We're unpacking the fascinating reality of where these massive machines actually come from. We're diving into the colossal, highly consolidated industrial ecosystems that build them and the staggering economics that make it all possible. This explainer is going to show you exactly how bending metal on a monumental scale translates directly to global economic power.
To really wrap our heads around this, imagine a massive steel structure rising almost 20 stories straight out of the water. Fully loaded, modern container ships carry over 24,000 individual containers. We're talking about a single vessel hauling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of electronics, machinery, and consumer goods in just one voyage. Building something this massive is nothing at all like building a regular boat. It demands tens of thousands of tons of steel, engines the size of small apartment buildings, and a highly coordinated industrial production process that only a handful of places on Earth can actually pull off. The sheer capital required, combined with the logistical precision needed to assemble these behemoths, forms an economic barrier to entry that most nations simply cannot cross.
So, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the scale of global shipping. 2, the shift to the east. 3, inside a mega shipyard. 4, modular shipbuilding. 5, why China dominates. And 6, commercial and naval power.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the scale of global shipping, and the massive vessels powering global trade.
It's pretty wild to think about, but nearly 90% of everything traded internationally moves by sea. And the reason why? The unit economics are just absolutely unbeatable. Transporting thousands of tons of cargo via ocean freight is astronomically cheaper than flying it or moving it by rail. This creates a foundational economic dependency. Whoever builds the ships effectively holds the keys to the entire global supply chain. Because without these vessels, supermarkets would empty out in days, factories would halt production, and global commerce would just completely freeze. Every single year, more than 11 billion tons of cargo are transported across the oceans by a merchant fleet of over 100,000 commercial vessels.
To put that physical footprint into perspective, some of these mega container ships stretch nearly 400 meters long. That's actually longer than 4 entire football fields placed back to back. But here's the crazy part, they aren't rigid blocks. Out on the open ocean, a 400-meter steel box has to bend, flex, and twist with massive waves without snapping in half. The incredible structural integrity required to keep that much cargo safe while surviving the world's harshest environments demands unparalleled engineering tolerances. Building machines this huge requires dedicated infrastructure that, frankly, most countries have long since abandoned.
Moving right along to Section 2, the shift to the east, and how the shipbuilding epicenter moved across the globe.
If we look back at the 20th century, European centers like Glasgow and Hamburg completely controlled the shipyards. But heavy manufacturing naturally chases economic efficiency, right? So by the 1970s, Europe lost its edge to Japan, which had adopted large-scale, highly efficient industrial manufacturing. Then, jumping into the 80s and 90s, South Korea aggressively invested state capital, introducing giant dry docks and factory-style assembly to overtake Japan. Finally, in the early 2000s, China entered the competition in a massive way. They didn't just compete on price, they treated shipbuilding as a vital strategic industry using unmatched economies of scale to capture the market from both South Korea and Japan.
Fast forward to today, and that long-term strategic investment has paid off immensely. We're now in a reality where one single country produces more than half of all commercial ships worldwide. We're talking about everything here, from bulk carriers and oil tankers to specialized liquefied natural gas carriers. And they didn't just capture 50% of the global orders, they captured the entire supply chain that supports those orders. When a nation controls the raw materials, the components, and the final assembly, it essentially dictates the pacing and pricing of global shipping. That creates a massive economic moat that is incredibly difficult for competitors to overcome. That brings us to Section 3, inside a mega shipyard, exploring the colossal Jingnan Shipyard. You see, a mega shipyard of this caliber operates less like a standard factory and a lot more like a self-contained industrial city. The Jiangnan Shipyard near Shanghai, for example, features giant dry docks stretching over 600 meters along the coastline. These docks are so incredibly vast that they easily hold several skyscraper-sized ships under construction at the exact same time. Literally tens of thousands of workers commute into this facility every single day, navigating a maze of heavy machinery and steel. It is a highly choreographed ecosystem where logistics, capital, and labor intersect on a monumental scale to output the most massive moving objects ever built by human hands.
And towering right above these enormous docks are the Goliath cranes. What's truly wild about these machines is their capacity. They can lift over 1,000 tons of steel in a single move. But it's not just about brute strength. It is all about mind-bending precision. The crane operators have to take a 1,000-ton piece of a ship, suspended high in the air, and slot it perfectly into position with millimeter tolerances. A sudden gust of wind or a tiny miscalculation could be completely disastrous. The sheer capital required just to build and maintain these massive cranes alone makes entering the shipbuilding market nearly impossible for new players today.
Let's dive into Section 4, Modular Shipbuilding Explained, and how exactly you build the world's largest machines.
Now you might be wondering how human beings actually piece together a machine that large without it taking literal decades. Well, in the old days, ships were built from the bottom up, piece by piece. But today, engineers divide a vessel into hundreds of structural sections which are all built simultaneously. Think of it kind of like assembling incredibly complex heavy-duty Lego bricks. But this isn't just about speed, it's fundamentally about capital efficiency. Building in blocks means shipyards can standardize parts, eliminate massive production bottlenecks, and drastically lower the cost per ton of the vessel. It effectively turns shipbuilding into a highly optimized assembly line.
Here is how it actually works in practice. First, automated robotics cut raw steel plates with absolute laser precision. Next, workers and advanced robots weld these into structural blocks. Because they're working in modules, one team can build the engine section, another builds the bow, and a third assembles the cargo area all at the exact same time. Finally, those massive Goliath cranes join the hundreds of sections together in the dry dock. This masterpiece of parallel engineering cuts build times down from years to mere months. Faster turnaround means the shipyard can sell more vessels per year, drastically compounding their revenue and strengthening their grip on the global market.
Which leads us to Section 5, Why China Dominates and the 5 Pillars of an Industrial Giant.
It really starts with the raw materials. A single ultra-large container ship can easily require over 50,000 tons of steel. Producing over 1 billion tons of steel a year, which is more than any other country on Earth, provides unbeatable, direct access to the most vital ingredient needed to build ships at scale. The economic advantage here is just staggering. Because the steel is manufactured locally, these shipyards completely eliminate the massive international shipping and import costs for their raw materials. They aren't waiting around on global supply chains to deliver steel. They literally own the supply chain from the raw iron ore all the way to the finished vessel.
But steel is just the first pillar here. The real secret sauce is what economists call the cluster effect. When the engine builder, the steel mill, and the shipyard are all located in the exact same coastal province, logistics costs just plummet. Combine that localized supply chain with massive infrastructure capable of building multiple ships simultaneously, and you spread out those fixed costs even further. Back all of this with strategic state government financing acting as a safety net, and power it with a massive, highly competitive skilled workforce. What you get is a flawlessly integrated manufacturing ecosystem that simply outprices global competitors.
Finally, Section 6, Commercial and Naval Power, looking at the geopolitical implications of maritime dominance. Here's the geopolitical reality of all this infrastructure. A shipyard of this incredible scale doesn't just build merchant fleets for carrying cars and clothing. The giant 600-meter dry docks, the 1,000-ton Goliath cranes, the massive steel fabrication halls, and the advanced automated welding facilities are fundamentally dual use. And this reveals the true economic brilliance of the strategy. By dominating the commercial shipbuilding market, a nation effectively gets the global commercial shipping industry to fund and subsidize the infrastructure, the technology, and the workforce needed for its own military naval expansion.
Basically, the capacity to build an ultra-large container ship translates directly to building modern warships. Massive vessels like the Fujian aircraft carrier, displacing over 80,000 tons and featuring advanced electromagnetic catapults, are born from the exact same ecosystem. Alongside it, they're producing heavily armed Type 055 destroyers loaded with advanced radar. Because commercial shipyards are constantly churning out merchant vessels, the workforce remains highly skilled and actively deployed. This rapid iteration on the commercial side translates directly into fewer errors, much faster build times, and incredible cost efficiency for high-stakes, highly advanced military assets. So these mega shipyards are, without a doubt, some of the largest and most critical industrial systems on Earth, connecting continents and fueling the global economy. Shipbuilding is no longer just about bending metal. It has become a powerful proxy for global economic dominance. It really makes you wonder, have we maxed out how big these ships can practically get? And as global trade continues to expand, relying on these localized, heavily subsidized supply chains, which nations' industrial ecosystems will ultimately control the oceans of tomorrow?
It is a massive question for the future of global commerce. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible systems that build our world.